Game development is notoriously difficult, right? Most people in the world that want to try making a game don't actually even have the skills to attempt it. And if that wasn't bad enough, many of the people who will manage to attempt to make a game will end up making games that don't sell at all, right? That don't actually get any attention, that don't go on to make them any money, and make it excessively difficult for them to go on and make a second game or a third game. Obviously, making money isn't the only important thing about being an artist, and there's nothing wrong with making a game for artistic reasons, but I think it's hard to, if you want to make game development your career, and if you want to spend as much of your life developing games as you can, it really helps if your games are making money, if you're able to support yourself, from those projects. But assuming you have the ability to make good games, right, games that are worth playing, there's a question that comes up, or should come up, which is, which game should you make? Well, in consideration of the fact, that presumably you'd like people to buy your game and play your game, you'd like to be able to make money, and you'd like to be able to make more games, in theory, you should develop the game idea that you have that seems the most likely to be successful. This is easier said than done, because it's not entirely clear. It never will be clear exactly why games become successful and why seemingly enticing, interesting games just flop. But if nothing else, I think you should try and shore up your odds, right? Go with the idea, the concept that seems the most likely to be successful, and do everything you can to try and make it likely to be the most successful, right? Take your game concept and sharpen it into a pointy stick that you can stab right into the heart of, gamers, and give yourself the best odds you can that you will make something that will be successful enough that you can then go out there and make another game. So I would like to do my small part as a kind of video game cheerleader on the sidelines here to tell you about the concept of hooks. And this is a concept that Ryan Clark outlines in an article he wrote for Gamasutra a few years ago called What Makes an Indie Hit? And it's a great article. You should go read it, especially because I'm not going to be outlining everything he talks about. He goes into pretty specific details about making trailers and marketing your game and stuff. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm only here going to talk about hooks, which is kind of the first and core, most crucial part of his methodology that he outlines. And by the way, if you don't know who Ryan Clark is, him and his team are probably best known for making a game called Crypt of the Necrodancer. And his company, Brace Yourself Games, they announced their new game, Industries of Titan, which looks really good, and you should check that out as well. But okay, let's talk about hooks. The concept of a hook is something that you're probably already aware of, right? It's usually brought up in relation to music, more specifically popular music on the radio, right? A lot of the time, songs are coming out and people talk about, they're really catchy, or they have a melody or a concept or something, some lyric that gets stuck in your head as you remember the song, all the time, as you, hopefully go out and buy the album or go out to the concert to see the artist perform it live or whatever. And Ryan posits that this idea of a hook or an earworm or a little, thing that gets stuck in your head can be applied to games, in the sense that games can have quote-unquote hooks in the form of interesting concepts, or just, it's kind of subjective, to be honest. Things about the game that are memorable and, will hopefully be the thing that has you go and Google that game, or find it on Steam, or hopefully go out and buy it, right? And once you've heard this idea of hooks, right? And once it's been laid out for you, which hopefully it will be momentarily, you'll begin to see it everywhere, right? You'll begin to see in the games that come out that are announced, especially the big AAA games, right? But even big, indie games that have a lot of momentum behind them, you can begin to kind of decode and reverse engineer what the hooks are and what it is about this game that has people so excited. And even more interesting is you can begin to get a sense of which hooks are better than others. Right? If you've seen Danny O'Dwyer's documentary about Rocket League, at one point the developers talk about the fact that the game idea, right, of cars playing soccer didn't seem to excite people that heard it, right? People, they'd be like, oh, okay, but they wouldn't go and check out the game. And that they realized when they had the opportunity to go with PlayStation Plus and actually give PlayStation owners the ability to play the game essentially for free, they realized that was going to be some of the best marketing they could possibly do, because they knew that their game was amazing. It just, in this paradigm that we're talking about with Ryan's article, it didn't have a strong conceptual hook that would get people, that you could easily tell your friend to get them to go check out. The best way for people to find out how amazing the game was to actually get the chance to just play it with no upfront investment. So Ryan, in his article, talks about Crypt of the Necrodancer, his game, and he identifies 7, but I actually see a couple more that I'll lay out, myself, and I'll make that clear where I'm diverging from where, what his list is. Okay, so what are Crypt of the Necrodancer's hooks? Well, the first is that the game's name is a pun, right? It's, Crypt of the Necrodancer. It's like Crypt of the Necromancer. And while a lot of people hate puns and will probably have a visceral and intense, sometimes hard to believe, negative reaction just to the fact that the title is a pun, it will nevertheless make the name very easy to remember. Even if whether they like it or hate it, their kind of emotional response will make Crypt of the Necrodancer something that is hard to forget. If they decide later on that they like that game idea and they want to go and search for it themselves, they will probably be able to remember what it was called, or at least something like what it was called, and Google will figure the rest out for them. Second, Crypt of the Necrodancer is a roguelike rhythm game, and that genre, just that genre description, is itself a hook because many people who hear it will have never heard of a game like that before, especially back when the game first came out, and just that idea of a roguelike rhythm game will get wheels turning in their head, right? They'll start to imagine what a game like that would play like, and that's good, right? They're thinking. It's, many of them will be intrigued, and many of them will be intrigued enough that they decide to go and check out the game. That's good. Third, the game has an amazing soundtrack, right? Now this, all of these are pretty subjective. This is probably the most subjective so far, but even though it's subjective, there is something to be said for consensus here, right? The soundtrack is great. Many people react very, very positively to Crypt of the Necrodancer's soundtrack, right? And so even though it's difficult to say that something is objectively good or bad music, if a lot of people like it, it's probably good, right? And I think the soundtrack speaks for itself. It's very good. Now, here is my first little diversion from what Ryan wrote, because he doesn't specifically say this, but I will, right? The next big hook, maybe one of the biggest so far for Crypt of the Necrodancer, is that the soundtrack is composed by Danny B, right? Danny Baranowski, who is a huge celebrity in his own right. As far as game composers go, Danny B is probably among the most famous. If you ask the average gamer to name a game composer, assuming it's not Koji Kondo or something like that, I would bet that many of them would name Danny B as either the first or second or top 5 names that they could even think of. And so that's important because Danny B, in addition to just being a great musician, right, and who's worth collaborating with on that fact alone, it has to be said that there is value to Necrodancer from a marketing standpoint, that one of the big collaborators is going to bring a massive audience with him that will be interested in the game just because Danny B is working on it, right? That's a pretty big hook. Okay, the next hook after that one is that the art is really good and has personality. Now, Ryan doesn't say this, but I think it's valid to point out that just the fact that the art is pixel art is kind of a hook in its own right? There's tons of people out there who really have an emotional response to pixel art specifically, and really engage with that aesthetic. And I would be willing to bet that a lot of the people who are fans of roguelikes, that genre specifically, especially back then when Necrodancer first came out, are the same kinds of people that would respond positively to a retro art style like pixel art. Beyond the fact that, yes, the art is good, right? It's pleasing to look at, and it's funny to watch the characters, dance along to the music and stuff. It's good art. The next hook that Ryan identifies that is probably one of the most important, in my opinion, especially for a developer who at the time was not really that well known, is the fact that Necrodancer can be played with a dance mat, like a DDR dance mat, right? And the importance of that detail might be lost on a lot of people, but it's really crucial. There are some people, I guess, who will buy Necrodancer as an excuse to use their dance mat that isn't, being used a whole lot. But the utility of marketing the game to those people is probably pretty limited. But in a convention setting, right, where you're publicly demoing the game in front of thousands and thousands of people, when you're an indie developer, it can be pretty hard to get people to actually stop and even pay attention to your booth, right? There's tons of people at places like PAX or other conventions or whatever, or even if you're at like a local game meetup, there's lots of people walking around, there's lots of things for them to look at, and, there's plenty of indie developers that will tell you that, tons of people just walk right by. They're on their way to the Capcom booth, and they're on their way to, even just a bigger, like the Behemoth's booth or something, right? And they just simply don't notice that you're there. But having a game, especially like a roguelike, kind of action-y game that you can play with a dance mat, is very novel. And will get a lot of people it'll get a lot of people to look at your booth just because there's a dance mat there. And then, if people are stopping and staring, that will start to build a crowd, and it's just a good way of, getting attention in that environment, and even more importantly, people will be talking about it, when they're out, getting food or whatever, they'll be saying, hey, did you see that game? There's a roguelike that uses dance mat, you gotta check it out, right? This is all really good stuff, really important. And then I'm not even talking about the fact that, if you're getting a crowd of people, there's journalists at places like PAX, and, they are looking for stuff to write about, and there's a good chance that they'll write a little article about this weird dance mat game that they saw. That's all great, right? I don't know, again, how much that matters in the sense of, like, if someone sees on Steam, oh, dance mat support, wow, I gotta get this. I don't know about that. But in terms of getting people to talk about your game and stop and check out your game in person, it can't be overstated how big of an impact that had. There's a couple more hooks, but I'm not really going to go into them too much. He mentions that the trailers are really good for Necrodancer. That's true. And in his article, he goes into a lot of detail later on, especially about like how to make a good trailer and how to promote your game and stuff. I'm not going to go into that. I highly recommend that you actually read the original article if you want to learn more about, how to maybe strategize making a trailer for your own game. But the most important thing that he elaborates on is that, and this is probably obvious to you already, not all of the hooks are created equal. Your game is going to have one or two core things that are its things, right? That it does and that you're hoping will get people to stop scrolling and click on it in the Steam store, or to click on the article about it on Polygon or whatever, right? There's going to be a couple things, and in Ryan's opinion, the most powerful hooks that Necrodancer has are the core mechanic, right? The genre being roguelike rhythm, and the music, right? Which, and he doesn't say, but I would add, Danny B. The music combined with the genre and stuff, that's the most interesting part, right? You have a roguelike rhythm game, that's really interesting. People will check that out just because that sounds interesting. And then the fact that the music is really good is pretty crucial, right? If you have a rhythm game and your music sucks, that sucks. That's not good. that would be a problem. But even though the other hooks are not as strong comparatively, they're still really important, right? It's important wherever you can, like in as many different vectors as possible, to try to have something, right? As many different opportunities to catch someone's interest as possible, right? Someone who doesn't care about the pun name, someone who doesn't care about the genre, doesn't care about the music, doesn't care about the dance mat, any of that stuff, that might be the person that checks out your game because they love the pixel art, right? That, and so when you're coming up with ideas for games, right? And you'll have tons of ideas, and Ryan has tons of ideas. You have you've got all these different concepts, all these different possible things. And, in Ryan's opinion, and I agree, it's good to actually go through these different concepts and try to figure out for yourself where the hooks are, or the potential hooks, right? And try to find as many axes as possible where you can have something, and again, it's very subjective, but something interesting, something that will stick in someone's mind, right? Or make them stop scrolling, or make them stop walking on a convention floor, right? As many different things as possible, right? The more difficult thing is actually evaluating hooks, right? Identifying them as one thing, but how do you know what is a good or bad hook? And the best way to do this, in Ryan's estimation, is to practice, is to look at what's popular and what's unpopular, and just see if you can figure out for yourself what the hooks are, and even, see if you can guess how popular a game will be based on the hooks that you've identified. So, on that topic, I thought it would be fun to take a look at Ryan's new game, Industries of Titan. I actually think that this would be something fun maybe to do in the comments, right? I'll put a link to the Steam page in the description, because that has, as far as I can tell, that has the only trailer, little teaser that's been released, that has all the screenshots that have been released, and it has all of the description that Ryan and his team have so far released about the game, right? So you'll be able to check it out and let me know what you think some of the hooks might be, right? I'll give you two that I know, right? One is cyberpunk. Obviously, I think that is an interesting genre choice, especially because cyberpunk is going through this kind of a resurgence right now, right? There's a couple cyberpunk games on the horizon. Ghost in the Shell just came out. Everyone hates that movie, but nevertheless, cyberpunk movie just came out, and obviously Blade Runner's on the way. It's a good time to announce a cyberpunk game. But the other big one that I'm aware of is that Ryan earlier this year hired this fantastic artist called Sir Karma on Twitter, and Sir Karma has a bit of a following. He's pretty famous, but not I wouldn't say as famous as Danny B, right? Who's also working on this game, by the way. There's a hook right there. But Sir Karma is kind of famous, but is such a unique artist. He makes this gorgeous voxel art, this 3D pixel stuff that's so unique, and it gives all of the screenshots just this super unique, interesting aesthetic, right? That's really, really powerful and really striking the instant you see it. I think that's a big hook, There's some people who actually know who Sir Karma is, but just, in addition to everything else, the Cyberpunk and Danny B and stuff, just connecting all the other stuff going on in this game with that art style in particular, man, that's just such a great move. And the game looks really cool. So, check it out. I'll put the link in there. Check it out. Go through and see. Because I don't know everything. There might be stuff going on here that I don't recognize. Like this isn't the whole city building thing isn't a genre that I'm an expert in it by any stretch. So if you can identify, some of the things that you think, Ryan's put in there to be a little hook to snag people that are interested, let me know. Put it in the comments. We'll talk about it. Oh, and also, just last little aside, if you're a game developer, you should definitely check out the full article that Ryan wrote. That'll be in the description. And I highly recommend that you check out Ryan's Twitch stream, which is called the Clark Tank, because every 2 weeks he does tons of in-depth analysis into what's trending, like what's popular on Steam, and it's really great. And he uses a lot of the same principles that are in the article. You can actually see him applying the whole hook, thing to the games that are trending on Steam, the things that are new, the things that are coming out. And it's just a fabulous resource. And frankly, more people need to know about it, because Ryan is just such an incredible resource, especially compared to a lot of people that are out there with educational stuff for game developers. Ryan is legit. Ryan's got good information, and if you're a game developer, you should check it out. I hope you liked the video.